Hi, welcome to Audiobook Academy. This is a self-paced audiobook. There's no need to keep an eye on things. Just pay attention. Thank you for taking the time to listen. This is a book summary of Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if Your Life Depended on It, by Voss. Want the upper hand in any negotiations you participate in? For practical advice on how to negotiate our way to victory, who better than former FBI hostage negotiator Voss? As a practical guide to winning any negotiation, Never Split the Difference is the best book out there. New ways of thinking about negotiation are revealed through Voss' battle-tested strategies in high-stakes negotiations. Each chapter is a lesson. There are real-life examples in each lesson from the author's time as a hostage negotiator. Immediately following the story, Voss discusses the best and worst ways to negotiate. To explain this, he uses behavioral theory and neuroscience. At the end of each chapter, he summarizes the most important points for us to take away and put into practice in our own lives. Negotiating isn't just something police officers or lawyers have to deal with, it's something we all need to hone, according to Voss. Voss believes that the techniques used in life-or-death negotiations can be applied to everyday conflicts. The principles are the same whether we're negotiating with kidnappers or simply trying to get our kids to nap. What's his secret? Make sure the person we're negotiating with feels heard and understood at all times during the conversation. Voss also teaches us how to deploy tactical empathy, why active listening matters, and how we can improve our active listening skills in order to establish trust. Many of us are guilty of merely listening, rather than actively participating. Using calibrated questions, Voss shows how we can influence our negotiating partner's perspective by asking the right questions. This makes it easier for us to work together towards a solution where neither of us feels the need to split the difference. We'll briefly explain why the old ways of negotiating don't work, how Voss redefines the negotiation game, and what tactics we can draw upon to be a successful negotiator. Ever been asked to split the difference? Is there a way to negotiate without compromising too much? In other words, how do you avoid having to split the difference, yet still negotiate calmly and reasonably? Many years ago, at a Harvard lecture, Voss was given the opportunity to discuss his negotiation strategies. Mock negotiations with one of his classmates were requested by the teacher. As a salesperson, Voss had to work within his counterpart's budget when pitching a product. Voss and the student bargained back and forth until they reached an agreement on the right price, which caused the instructor to burst out laughing when told. As a teacher, Voss had become accustomed to seeing her students split their budgets between the minimum selling price and the maximum budget. The student had agreed to spend the entire amount of his allowance because Voss had persuaded him. Voss was asked to negotiate with another student to rule out a fluke, and once again he walked away with the highest possible sum of money. With their knowledge of cutting-edge negotiation techniques, how did Voss convince the Harvard students that they should hand over their entire budget to him? There is no doubt that Voss is a skilled negotiator. Because of his experience as the FBI's lead hostage negotiator, he's become an expert negotiator. Because a bad deal or a significant compromise in a hostage negotiation can cost lives, Voss couldn't afford to split the difference at that time. The ultimate negotiation mistake, according to Voss, is asserting our demands before hearing what the other party has to say. However, he learned that sometimes we can't compromise. While it's understandable that we want to maximize our own gains, this approach is counterproductive because it implies that we're aiming to maximize our own losses. As Voss puts it, we see our counterpart as the enemy and the negotiation as the battle. Equally ineffective is trying to persuade someone to see things our way. Here's where the psychology of negotiating comes into play. We're all human, and while we like to think, thinking isn't always our forte. There are times when our emotions and irrationality can get the better of us. To truly master the art of negotiation, we need to do two things. Our emotional intelligence and intuition can help us relate to others in an empathic way, but first we must reframe how we think about negotiations. How does a person like Voss force himself to feel pity for a kidnapper or a robber in the first place? To be empathetic, we don't have to like or agree with the other person, but we do have to be able to understand their thoughts and feelings. Empathy is a valuable skill to have. Empathizing with someone's situation helps build trust. If we don't have a trusting relationship, we can never get what we want out of any negotiation. As a result, many people think of negotiation as a zero-sum game between adversaries, rather than as a means of achieving a mutually beneficial agreement. In contrast to other negotiators, Voss believes that we should treat each other as equal partners in the negotiation process. Negotiation has evolved from being adversarial to being more collaborative as a result of this new understanding. When negotiation was first recognized as a field of expertise in the 1970s, it was predicated on the assumption that people acted rationally when they entered into an agreement. Think we're always rational? That's a stretch. In Thinking Fast and Slow, psychologist Daniel Kahneman and economist Amos Tversky prove that we're prone to cognitive bias, which causes errors in how we process information and form judgments. Think we're always rational? That's a stretch. We end up acting in irrational ways because of this. When it comes to our actions, we aren't always as logical and rational as we'd like to believe. Because our irrational and emotional side can often outweigh our logical side in a negotiation, we must be able to understand our counterpart's emotional motivations, even if this is unconscious at times, in order to get the best deal possible. As a result, tactical empathy is so critical. When it comes to successful negotiations, good negotiators use their intuition and emotional intelligence to establish trust, gather the information they need, and negotiate in a way that benefits both parties. Voss's secret is tactical empathy. If you don't agree with someone's terms and conditions or are unwilling to compromise, Voss says you still have the right to show empathy. We build trust through tactical empathy, and trust is the foundation for a successful negotiation and a fair resolution. Tactical empathy is the act of sincerely empathizing with our counterpart's situation and then getting them to empathize with us. At the moment, it's all about getting inside another person's head and feeling their emotion. It's highlighting both the emotional obstacles and the possible ways to reach an agreement in the negotiation process. Empathy is the skill of being able to understand and express one's own needs and viewpoint in terms of those of another. Sympathy, on the other hand, is when we identify with the feelings of the other person. So empathy means that we can understand another person's point of view, but we don't have to agree with them, or even like them. We can negotiate fairly and collaboratively without making a heavy compromise if we use tactical empathy, which Voss describes as the beauty of empathy. By making sure our counterpart is heard and understood, then getting them to understand our problem, we can work together without compromising too much. This is how we do it. We actively listen to each other, and we build trust. You should gather as many facts as possible before beginning any negotiations. In order to get a full picture of what we're dealing with, we need to actively listen to those around us. Is there anyone who isn't fully engaged in the conversation you're having with them? It's possible they're looking at their phone or interrupting you before you've finished your thoughts. When someone else is speaking, may we be the ones who are too preoccupied with our own thoughts to hear what they have to say. Active listening, on the other hand, necessitates a full attention. It's difficult to understand what another person is feeling or saying when we're distracted by our own inner monologue. As negotiators, we must ensure that our counterparts feel heard and understood in order to be successful. Active listening is an important part of developing a relationship with someone because it allows them to open up and share their thoughts and feelings, which in turn helps us figure out what the problem is. Fortunately, listening is a skill that we can learn and practice. Here are 3 ways to improve your active listening skills: mirror, alter your tone of voice, and label your emotions. Look like your counterpart. Mirroring is a great way to build trust and make someone else feel like they are being heard and understood. Even their tone of voice and body language can be imitated through their verbal and nonverbal behaviors. According to Voss, mirroring is generally an unconscious behavior. We are rarely aware of it when it occurs, but it is a sign that people are bonding, in sync, and establishing the kind of rapport that leads to trust. Good friends often use the same words or phrases and adopt the same gestures, particularly when they are together. A negotiation can help us practice mirroring our counterparts instead of just those we're familiar with. Mirroring is an effective tool for establishing common ground during negotiations. As a result, it makes the other person feel like they are more like us. Creating a sense of belonging and trust helps to increase engagement levels by highlighting commonalities. In a restaurant, Professor Richard Wiseman tested the theory of mirroring with a few waiters. Mirroring and positive reinforcement were used by 2 separate groups. There were 2 teams of waiters, each working at a different table, who took orders. The members of one team responded to each directive with words of affirmation and praise. Those in the other group simply repeated their customers' orders back to them in the same words they used. Is this what happened? Waiters who used mirroring received 70% more in tips than those who used positive reinforcement as a tipping strategy. You should try to mirror your counterpart by repeating 1 or 3 of the most important words they said the next time you're in a negotiation. It's just as important to pay attention to how we say something as it is to say something at all. Adjust your voice's phraseology. How many times have you become enraged with someone because of the manner in which they said something rather than the content of what they said? In successful negotiations, tone of voice can be a powerful weapon. According to a UCLA study, 93% of communication is nonverbal, with the tone of voice accounting for nearly 40% of that. Win-win negotiations necessitate good voice technique. A negotiator can use any of three voice tones: the late-night DJ voice, the positive/playful tone, or an authoritative tone. It's common for parents to use an assertive tone of voice in negotiations, but it can be counterproductive, resulting in a backlash from our counterpart. When an FM DJ is on late at night, his voice has a soothing low-pitched tone that can make anyone feel safe and secure. In order to make a point, we use it frequently. Using this technique correctly, you can project a sense of authority and dependability without arousing suspicion. To illustrate this, Voss shares an anecdote from his own bank robbing experience. Joe had to be replaced by Voss, so he had to step up. A calm, deep voice informed the burglar that Joe was taking a break and that our author would be taking over. The robber was not alarmed by Joe's departure because of Voss's cool and collected demeanor. When it comes to certain situations, you may need to maintain a calm but upbeat demeanor. Several years ago, a colleague's girlfriend was a pro negotiator, not in the sense of a hostage, but rather in the context of shopping. During her time in Istanbul, she developed a fond habit of haggling with spice vendors to get the best deal. As skilled negotiators as the merchants were, they were unable to refuse her price proposals because of her approach. When we use a light-hearted tone, we convey a sense of trustworthiness and friendliness. Identify your feelings by writing them down. We validate someone's feelings by simply acknowledging them by labeling them. Giving a name to someone's emotion shows that we identify with how that person feels, which aids in the development of trust and closeness between two people. In this case, Voss provides an illustration. There was a pharmaceutical sales representative who was trying to influence the prescribing physician to use the company's products instead of those of the doctor's own. The doctor's initial demeanor was one of skepticism and coldness. In the midst of a bad sales pitch, she realized that he truly cared about his patients. It was noticeable that his body language and tone of voice warmed up when he spoke about his patients. She appreciated his dedication to his patients and their well-being, and they grew close over their shared understanding of his therapeutic approach. The doctor's guard was down and he listened to what she had to say after that. As soon as she presented the benefits of her product, he agreed to give it a shot and immediately placed an order. We can show that we're listening by using techniques like mirroring and speaking in the right tone of voice. Labeling, on the other hand, is how we show that we truly understand and empathize with another person's world. The ability to empathize with the other side's point of view is essential to any negotiation. But in order for a negotiation to be a success, both parties must be empathetic. Establishing rapport with our counterparts is the first step toward convincing them of the validity of our point of view. In this case, it's important to ask the right questions. Ask what and how focused questions. Why have you done that? Has never been asked during an argument. When someone accuses us, it makes us feel defensive, and that's why we're defensive. What? And how? Questions are less accusatory than why? And how? Questions. A negotiation can become a collaborative, problem-solving session with the help of calibrated questions, which begin with the words what and how. In order to give our counterpart the impression that they are in charge of solving the problem, we use calibrated questions, which are open-ended problem-focused questions. The negotiation power dynamic shifts, and our counterpart has to consider our position and show us empathy. The ultimate calibrated question is, how am I supposed to do that? Voss says. It's up to us to put them into practice. Let's say your landlord decides to raise your monthly rent from $1,200 to $1,500. Avoiding the rent increase and negotiating a lower rent are both possible if you understand the landlord's perspective. What do I need to do to accomplish this? For example, it appears that you believe your apartment is undervalued, and you desire a fair price, would be an acceptable response. It's just not possible for me to pay $1,500 a month when I'm only making $1,200 a month. The subtext here is, I value your perspective, could you please assist me in resolving this issue? The key to establishing trust is to make the other person feel heard. This exchange is likely to lead to one of two outcomes. It's possible that they'll try to find a creative solution so that both of you get what you want, or they'll lower the rent to make room for you. Every offer can be politely rebuffed if it doesn't meet your needs. There's no end to the negotiation process until all parties are satisfied with the outcome. In closing, here we go. Being a skilled negotiator can make a huge difference in your professional and personal life. When it comes to improving our relationships and avoiding future conflicts, this is a valuable skill to have. We all have a basic desire to be heard and understood on some level. Take advantage of this, and see how quickly you might be able to secure a favorable outcome in your negotiations. Take in all the information your counterpart provides, make them feel heard, And use calibrated questions to get them to empathize with your situation by listening to them. Finding a solution that works for both parties without forcing you to split the difference and give up on what's important is the ultimate goal. Everyone will want to read Never Split the Difference. However, you'll want to keep it a secret because it gives you a competitive advantage when it comes to successfully negotiating a deal. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Please don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. See you in next audiobook.